and sharing and drinking from the same bombilla and drinking out of your, I mean, it's just cool.
I was just so excited that we were going to be able to create, but it also allows me to be really detached from the outcome. I can just show up, I can put good work out.
Okay, so Americans are finally saying what everyone's been whispering for years, and honey, the gloves are officially off. A commentator just went on air and said something that made millions of people stop scrolling and go, wait, did she really just say that? Here's the thing, this isn't some random internet troll hiding behind a fake profile. This is mainstream media finally dropping the polite act and getting real. And you know what? People aren't shocked. They're nodding along. Because that whole fairy tale story we've been sold about the struggling actress who made it to the top through pure talent and hard work.
They say the people who know your past are the ones who can ruin your future. And for Meghan Markle, that person wasn't a tabloid.
Yeah, that castle's crumbling faster than you can say happily ever after. The truth is way messier, way more controversial, and honestly, way more interesting. So buckle up, because we're about to talk about everything nobody wanted to say out loud until now. Real quick, if you're here for the unfiltered truth, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what's coming is absolutely wild. Drop a like if you're ready for this. Now let's get into it. Let's talk about how one relationship can change absolutely everything. We're talking cable actress to global icon status practically overnight.
Meghan Markle just did the unthinkable. Not another interview, not a podcast rant. This time she went for the jugular.
And listen, there's nothing wrong with that on the surface, but here's where it gets interesting. The pathway to fame, fortune, and that massive platform she has today, it didn't come from decades of grinding in Hollywood or building some empire from the ground up. Nope, it came from a royal ring sliding onto her finger. The timing tells you everything you need to know. Before Harry entered the picture, she had a moderately successful career. She was working, she was hustling, she was doing her thing, auditions, callbacks, the occasional gig here and there. She had steady work on a cable show, which honestly, that's more than most actors ever get.
They say every secret has a keeper. And sometimes that keeper isn't a stranger, it's the person who once knew you best.
But let's be real about what that looked like. It wasn't red carpets every week. It wasn't magazine covers. It wasn't being recognized everywhere she went. It was the kind of career where you're comfortable, you're working, but you're also still hoping for that next big break. You know, the kind of break that takes you from working actor to household name. That break that most people in Hollywood spend their entire lives waiting for. But the second that relationship started, boom, everything transformed. And I mean everything. Doors that were locked suddenly swung wide open.
Meghan Markle just got humbled in a way no one saw coming. At the Fortune Most Powerful Women Summit in Washington,
opportunities that didn't exist before were suddenly everywhere. The kind of opportunities that most actors spend their entire lives chasing. We're talking about going from cable TV actress to someone the entire world wants to interview. From someone hustling for auditions to someone getting offered major deals without even asking. That's not a gradual climb, that's a rocket launch. And that's the part that's got people talking, because there's a massive difference between climbing your way up step by step, rejection after rejection, audition after audition, and getting catapulted to the top through one single connection. Think about it this way.
No one saw it coming. Not the cameras, not the guests, not even the people closest to them. Because now, behind closed doors and caught...
How many talented actors are out there right now grinding away, doing everything right, and still can't get their big break? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. They're taking acting classes, going to every audition, networking like crazy, doing everything they're supposed to do. And most of them will never get close to the level of opportunity that came flooding in the moment that royal relationship became public. That's just the reality of how it all went down. Now, don't get me wrong, plenty of people meet their partners and things change. That's life. Relationships open doors sometimes, and that's totally normal.
You ever notice how the biggest secrets hide in the smallest places? For Meghan Markle's family, that secret began with something so...
But when you spend years after that talking about being self-made, about building everything yourself, about being an independent female founder who did it all on her own, that's when people start side-eyeing the whole story. Because the truth is sitting right there in plain sight. One relationship changed the entire trajectory, and everything that came after, every deal, every speech, every opportunity, every door that opened, every platform that suddenly became available traces back to that moment. That's not building from scratch. That's starting from somewhere most people could never even dream of reaching.
News breaking that Meghan Markle, per Balenciaga's own designer, invited herself.
And pretending otherwise, that's what's got people raising their eyebrows. Now, here's where things get really interesting. She loves using this one particular label, female founder. You'll hear it in interviews, see it in her bios, catch it in speeches, female founder this, female founder that. And listen, that's a powerful title. It commands respect. It says you built something from nothing, that you took risks, that you created something meaningful. But here's the question everyone's finally asking. Founder of what exactly? Let's break this down. Before the royal connection, there was the TIG.
For 6 long years, Buckingham Palace never said a word about the whispers surrounding Archie's birth. Every question about Archie's birth.
It was her lifestyle blog, and honestly, it was cute. It had a following. She posted about food and travel and lifestyle stuff, wine recommendations, recipes, little life musings. Nothing groundbreaking, but it was hers, and she was building it. Plenty of actresses have side projects like that, trying to build something beyond just acting roles. But then Harry came into the picture, and poof, the TIG disappeared. Just gone. Shut down completely. Now you think if you were truly passionate about something you founded, you'd keep it going, right?
Meghan Markle is going for a new rebrand. That's right. That is right.
You'd find a way to make it work, maybe hire someone to manage it, keep the brand alive. But nope, it vanished the second something bigger came along. Fast forward to post-royal life, and suddenly we've got American Riviera Orchard. We've got Netflix deals. We've got Spotify partnerships. And she's calling herself a founder again. But here's what people are noticing. Every single one of those ventures came after she became the Duchess of Sussex. Not before. After. That title opened those doors. That connection made those deals possible. The meetings that got scheduled.
Breaking right now, the British royal family mired in one of its biggest crises in history.
The partnerships that materialized. The investment interest that suddenly appeared. All of it happened because of 3 words. Duchess of Sussex. And that's what's got real entrepreneurs absolutely fuming. You want to know what a real female founder looks like? It's the woman maxing out her credit cards to get her business off the ground. It's someone skipping sleep because they're working a day job and building their dream at night. It's failing, picking yourself back up, trying again, facing rejection after rejection, and still pushing forward. It's taking risks.
Meghan Markle just did the unthinkable. Not another interview, not a podcast rant. This time she went for the jugular.
When you have nothing to fall back on. It's hearing no 100 times before you get one yes. It's wondering if you'll make rent next month because you invested everything in your vision. That's founding something. That's building from scratch. That's the journey that earns you the title of founder. But starting with a Duchess title with instant credibility, with doors already wide open, with connections most people could never access in 10 lifetimes, that's not the same journey. That's not the same struggle. That's starting on third base and acting like you hit a triple.
Breaking right now, the British MSM might be deciding to propagate.
And the difference matters because words matter. When you call yourself a founder, you're claiming a specific kind of journey. You're saying you built something from nothing. But if your nothing includes being royalty adjacent with a massive built-in platform, that's not nothing. That's everything. That's the kind of head start most entrepreneurs would literally give anything to have. Okay, so let's talk about the Hollywood career story because there's the version her biggest fans tell. And then there's what actually happened. If you listen to some people, you'd think she walked away from this massive.
Angela Levin sat down on that morning show, and within minutes, she said something that made every royal watcher's blood run cold.
A-list career, sacrificing everything for love, like she was on the verge of becoming the next big thing and gave it all up. But people in Hollywood, they're telling a very different story. Here's the reality. Her biggest role was on Suits, which, yeah, was a successful show. It had loyal fans, it ran for several seasons, and she played Rachel Zane, a paralegal who eventually becomes a lawyer. That's a solid gig. Most actors would be thrilled to have that kind of steady work. But let's keep it real. Suits wasn't Friends.
The The cameras flashed like lightning in a summer storm. Two brothers, once inseparable, now fractured.
It wasn't Grey's Anatomy. It wasn't one of those cultural phenomenon shows that everybody's talking about at the water cooler. It was a good cable show with a dedicated audience, but it wasn't making her a household name. Before Suits, and even during Suits, she was doing what thousands of actors do every single day. Auditions, callbacks, hoping for that next role, taking meetings, networking. That's not a criticism. That's just the reality of being a working actor in Hollywood. It's a grind. It's competitive.
Radar Online didn't just wake up and know which brand of medication Harry's been using. Someone had to drop that info.
And she was in the mix with everyone else trying to make it happen. She wasn't walking red carpets every week. She wasn't on magazine covers. She was working, sure, but she was also still chasing that next big opportunity like everyone else in the industry. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The doors that started opening for her, they didn't come from casting directors suddenly realizing her talent. They came from a completely different direction. Once that royal relationship became public, everything shifted. Suddenly there was interest that had nothing to do with her acting resume.
Would that be the right decision?
I really think it would, Dan. I think William is absolutely right here.
The opportunities that flooded in weren't because Hollywood was desperate to cast Rachel Zane in their next big project. They came because she was connected to royalty. That's not climbing your way up through auditions and callbacks. That's a completely different trajectory. And look, there's nothing wrong with doors opening because of who you know or who you're with. That happens all the time. Connections matter in every industry. But the difference here is the story that gets told afterward. When you frame it like you were this massive star who gave up everything.
States that made all of her staff quit on her. I'd be very interested to know, what is really wrong with Meghan Markle?
When the reality was more like steady cable work that transformed into global opportunities through one relationship, people notice that gap. They notice the difference between the narrative and what actually went down. Now let's get into the Netflix situation, because this one's a big deal. We're talking about a $100 million partnership that was supposed to change everything. When that deal was announced, the hype was massive. This was going to be groundbreaking content. This was going to redefine storytelling. This was going to be their moment to show the world what they could create.
No. When Tom Bradby asked him about the racist comments, we never made racist comments. It's the press that said.
The expectations were sky high. But here's what actually happened. The content that came out, it was mostly about them. Their story, their struggles, their perspective, their journey. And listen, there's nothing inherently wrong with telling your own story. Lots of people do documentaries about their lives. But when you sign a deal that big, when you build up that much anticipation, people expect something more than just a personal diary turned into a series. Think about what viewers were hoping for. They were expecting shows that would make an impact.
Into the safety of your staff room or whatever, this woman just slaps you sideways. How would you feel?
Content that would start conversations, projects that would showcase new voices or tell stories that hadn't been told before, cultural moments that people would remember. But what they got was more focused on the personal narrative than on creating something bigger than themselves. And that gap between expectation and delivery, people noticed it immediately. The thing is, when you're working with a platform as big as Netflix, there's a certain level of output that's expected. There's a reason deals like that make headlines. It's because people assume you're going to create content.
She starts using her other hand as well. Now, she's illustrating along with this as she talks about what she's done. And her illustrators are landing
that reaches beyond your own bubble. Content that connects with audiences who might not even know who you are. Content that stands on its own merit, not just because of whose name is attached to it. And when that doesn't happen, when the projects feel more self-focused than audience-focused, that's when the disappointment sets in. Here's what makes it even more complicated. The promise was there, the platform was there, the resources were definitely there. Everything needed to create something truly special was available.
I've spoken about this before in my previous TikTok videos, but I'm going to talk about it again because it's
But turning all of that potential into actual impactful content. That's the challenge. And when the results don't match the buildup, when the cultural impact doesn't materialize the way everyone expected, people start asking questions about whether the hype was ever realistic in the first place. All right, so here's something that got people talking in a major way: the Instagram comment section situation. She made the decision to shut down comments entirely on her posts, like completely turn them off. And the official explanation?
It all started like just another glossy morning at Heathrow's VIP terminal, the kind where limos purr quietly at the curb and attendants whisper instead of speak.
It's to protect her supporters from negativity. Sounds reasonable on the surface, right? Protecting people from hate and toxicity is important. But here's the thing: people aren't really buying that explanation. Think about how social media works for every other celebrity out there. Actors, musicians, athletes, content creators, they all deal with negative comments. It comes with the territory. When you have a public platform, when millions of people follow you, you're going to get criticism. Some of it's fair, some of it's harsh, and that doesn't exactly scream confidence. If anything, it looks like someone who can't handle criticism.
That Meghan Markle did plan this, but what is new in terms of Megyn Kelly's revelation is that it is Trevor
who doesn't want to see differing opinions, who needs everything to be positive all the time. Every public figure gets hate, every single one. Politicians deal with it, actors deal with it, athletes deal with it. It's not fun, it's not fair sometimes, but it's part of the deal when you choose to live your life in public. You can't have the spotlight without the shadows. And by turning off comments, the message being sent is pretty clear. The criticism is too much to handle. But you know what? That's not the empowerment narrative that gets preached. That's vulnerability disguised as protection.
Did every rule of 1917 apply, or were exceptions being made? The palace doesn't forgive mistakes on paper.
And people see right through it. Get this. She showed up as the guest of honor at this fancy women-only vegan dinner called A Seat at the Table. On paper, it sounds empowering, right? Women gathering together, important conversations, making a difference. But when you dig into what actually went down at this event, people started rolling their eyes pretty hard. This wasn't your average dinner party. We're talking high-end vegan wine, elite chefs preparing multi-course meals, everything organic and luxury level. The whole evening was dripping in that kind of expensive wellness aesthetic.
Because if the secret breaks, it won't just expose Meghan. It will expose the decisions he made to protect her. Inside the sus.
And the messaging? One of the chefs literally declared that giving up meat and dairy is the only way future generations will have food. Like, that's the solution to food scarcity. Everyone just needs to go vegan. And there she was, sitting at the table, nodding along like this was some groundbreaking revelation. But here's where it gets tone deaf. It's incredibly easy to preach about organic veganism and regenerative agriculture when you're living in a mansion with a private chef who can prepare anything you want, when your grocery budget is essentially unlimited.
The British royal family mired in one of its biggest crises in history. But if you thought
when you've never had to choose between buying basics or splurging on specialty items, that's not activism. That's lifestyle luxury wrapped up in a save the planet bow. Real people, working moms and dads, they're out here trying to stretch a $50 grocery budget for the entire week. They're clipping coupons, watching sales, buying whatever keeps their family fed. A bag of organic kale costs $15 in some places. Grass-fed meat, plant-based alternatives, all that fancy stuff. Most families can't afford it. They're making choices based on what they can afford.
Brand was built on something maybe they weren't while they were working members of the royal family, and they come over to the United States.
Not what some chef at an exclusive dinner says is the only way to save the future. And that's what got people fired up. Social media went wild. Parents were posting their actual grocery receipts saying, "This is my reality. This is what I'm working with." The backlash was brutal because Americans really hate being lectured about how to live by people who've never had to face the same struggles. When someone who's never had to worry about making rent tells you how to shop for groceries, it doesn't land as inspiration. It lands as totally out of touch. The whole thing felt less like genuine activism and more like performance.
They say the people who know your past are the ones who can ruin your future.
And for Meghan Markle, that person wasn't a tabloid reporter or a royal aide.
Like putting on a show of caring about important issues while surrounded by privilege and luxury. And people can spot that from a mile away. If you want to talk about food accessibility and sustainability, maybe start by acknowledging that not everyone has the same resources. Maybe recognize that privilege plays a huge role in who gets to make those choices. But hosting an exclusive, expensive dinner and acting like everyone should just follow your example, that's not empowerment. That's elitism served on a very expensive plate.
Breaking right now, the British royal family mired in one of its biggest crises in history.
Now here's where the story takes a really interesting turn. For years, the British tabloids were the villains in this whole narrative. They got blamed for everything. Harsh coverage, invasion of privacy, unfair treatment, and to be fair, British tabloids can be brutal. That's kind of their thing. So when she talked about how difficult the UK press was, a lot of people sympathized. Americans especially were like, yeah, leave her alone. Those tabloids are too much. But then something shifted. The American media, her home turf, the place where she should have the most support.
Hold on to your hats, because Prince Harry's world just got flipped upside down in the most unexpected.
Started asking different kinds of questions. And these weren't tabloid hit pieces. These were mainstream outlets, respected publications, the kind that usually play it safe. They started writing articles with titles like, "What does Meghan actually do?" Not in a supportive way, in a genuinely questioning way. That shift is huge because when the press in your own country starts getting skeptical, when American journalists are the ones raising eyebrows, that's a completely different situation. It's one thing when foreign media criticizes you. You can blame,
man, Tyler Perry, go ahead and start making that Prince Harry.
Cultural differences. You can say they don't understand. You can paint yourself as the outsider being attacked. But when your own people start questioning the narrative, that hits different. And here's why it's happening. Americans love an underdog story. They love someone who fights their way up from nothing, who overcomes obstacles, who earns their success through hard work and determination. That's the kind of story that resonates here. Rags to riches, self-made success, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That's the American dream narrative that people connect with.
1998, before the tiaras, before the royal interviews, before the world even knew her name, there was just Meghan Markle.
But when the story starts looking less like an underdog fighting the system, and more like privilege trying to rebrand itself as struggle, Americans check out. They start asking questions. They start looking closer at the details. And what they're seeing is someone who had advantages most people could never dream of, talking about how hard everything was. Someone who married into royalty, then built a brand criticizing royalty. Someone preaching about authenticity while carefully controlling every aspect of their public image.
In fact, just get the whole pot, because I am beside myself. I had to turn this camera.
The tone shift in American media isn't about hate or being mean. It's about credibility. When journalists start writing skeptical pieces, when opinion writers start questioning the narrative, when even sympathetic outlets start adding caveats to their coverage. That's not a conspiracy. That's people genuinely trying to figure out what the actual story is versus what they're being told it is. And that's what makes this moment so significant. She can't blame the British press anymore. She can't say it's because they don't understand her or they're biased against her. This is American media, American journalists.
When Meghan Markle sat across from Christian Amanpour at CNN studio, everyone expected a thoughtful conversation.
American audiences all starting to look at things differently. When your home team stops cheering, when the people who should naturally be in your corner start stepping back, that's when you know the narrative has fundamentally changed. All right, let's circle back to that Netflix deal because there's more to this story. Remember, we're talking about a massive agreement here, $100 million. That's the kind of money that comes with serious expectations. Netflix doesn't hand out deals like that for fun. They're expecting content that performs.
Marcus Anderson knows not to be laughing at whatever just happened, but the Meg does not know not to laugh.
that gets people talking, that justifies the investment. So what actually happened behind the scenes? Word is, things didn't exactly go as planned. The partnership that was supposed to revolutionize storytelling, it quietly started cooling down, not with some big dramatic announcement, but more like a slow fade. Projects that were supposed to be in development just never materialized. The big ideas that got teased early on kind of disappeared, and the content that did get released, it underperformed compared to what Netflix was hoping for. Here's the thing about streaming platforms.
Well, the holiday special is coming out in...
I mean, that's a no. That is a no.
They live and die by their numbers. Views, completion rates, how many people actually watch all the way through, whether shows trend on social media. Those metrics matter a lot. And when a project doesn't hit those targets, when it doesn't create the buzz or pull in the audience numbers that justify the budget, that's when partnerships start getting reassessed. But it wasn't just about the numbers. There's also the creative side of things. Apparently, there were some challenges around creative control. When you're working with a major platform, there's usually a collaborative process. The platform has expectations, they have experience with what works.
You see things being announced or headlines in the newspapers or anything like that, you need to ask yourself.
They know their audience. But when someone wants final say on every single frame, when they're not willing to take feedback or adjust based on what the platform knows about their viewers, that creates friction. And friction in creative partnerships usually doesn't end well. The result, content that felt safe rather than bold, projects that played it careful instead of taking risks. And here's the brutal truth. In the streaming world, safe doesn't usually win. People have endless options. If your show isn't grabbing attention, if it's not creating moments people want to talk about, viewers just move on to something else.
Signed another agreement with them. No, Netflix hasn't signed any agreements with her. Netflix ended the agreement.
There are literally thousands of other things to watch. What makes this whole situation even more interesting is the contrast. Netflix has had huge success with other partnerships. They've worked with creators who came in with bold visions and delivered content that became cultural phenomena. Shows that everyone was talking about, documentaries that sparked conversations, content that went viral and brought in massive viewership. So it's not like the platform doesn't know how to make successful deals. They do, but those partnerships work when there's collaboration.
As Meghan stepped into the global spotlight, her transformation wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Old photos showed a softer...
When there's trust in the process, when creators are willing to take creative risks. The quiet cooling of this partnership tells a story all on its own. No big breakup announcement, no dramatic statements, just a gradual shift away from what was supposed to be this revolutionary content deal. And in Hollywood, when things go quiet like that, that usually means the results spoke for themselves. When partnerships end not with a bang, but with a whimper, it's because both sides realized it wasn't working and decided to move on without making a big fuss about it.
Crumbling like that, you know, she has to mention Harry because Harry, of course, is her trump card. That's what.
So here we are at the end of this whole story. And when you step back and look at everything we've talked about, there's one thread that runs through all of it. One common denominator that connects every opportunity, every deal, every platform, every headline. And that's the title, Duchess of Sussex. Those 3 words changed everything. Every speech that got booked, it happened because of that title. Every partnership that materialized, the title opened that door. Every interview, every appearance, every chance to build a brand. All of it traces back to being connected to royalty. And here's what makes it so complicated.
Invited herself to the Balenciaga show. That has been revealed in a recent interview in The Cut by the new creative director.
The entire brand that got built is based on stepping away from the very thing that made it all possible, criticizing the institution while cashing checks that only exist because of the institution. That's the contradiction people can't look past. Strip away the royal connection and ask yourself, what's actually there? Without the Duchess title, without the palace drama, without the story of leaving royalty behind, what's the foundation? That's the question question more and more people are asking. Not out of hate, not out of jealousy, but out of genuine curiosity.
Can you believe this is the same magazine that once crowned her as Hollywood's fairy tale princess? The same one that wrote endless stories about...
Because when you remove the one thing that created the platform, it's hard to see what's left standing on its own. The performance worked for a while. The underdog narrative, the fighter breaking free, the woman taking control of her own story. People bought into it, they rooted for it, but narratives only hold up as long as they match reality. And when the cracks start showing, when the contradictions become too obvious to ignore, that's when audiences start pulling back. That's when supporters start asking harder questions. That's when even friendly media starts adding allegedly and reportedly to their coverage.
Meghan Markle played her game well. From the very beginning, she had my son Harry under her spell.
And look, this isn't about whether someone deserves success or not. Plenty of people find success through connections. That's how the world works. But it's about the story you tell about that success. It's about whether you own the advantages you had or pretend they didn't exist. It's about the difference between saying, I got opportunities because of this relationship and I'm grateful, versus I built everything myself from nothing. One of those is honest. The other one, that's where people start checking out. The thing about building a brand on borrowed credibility is that eventually people notice. They notice when the deals slow down.
No wonder Meghan Markle's eyes have seemed off lately. Few people realize it, but she and Prince Harry might actually be divorced. First,
they notice when the cultural impact doesn't materialize. They notice when the home country media stops being supportive. They notice when the whole thing starts feeling more like a performance than something genuine. And once people notice, it's really hard to get them back on your side. So what happens now? What happens when the royal mystique fades? When the novelty of the palace story wears off? When the title that opened every door becomes just a footnote in someone's biography instead of the main selling point? That's the moment of truth. That's when we find out if there's actual substance underneath the brand.
Did you notice Harry's smile? He seemed not to have been this happy for a long time. At that time, Harry was not yet married and attended a...
Or if the brand was always just the title in disguise. Because here's the reality. You can only build on someone else's foundation for so long before people expect you to show what you can create on your own. And right now, as the spotlight shifts, as the questions get louder, as even the most loyal supporters start wondering what the end game is, one thing is becoming crystal clear. The fairy tale that once captivated millions isn't just losing its sparkle, it's being rewritten entirely. And this time, the audience isn't clapping.
No wonder Prince Harry refuses to make eye contact with Meghan Markle in public. No one has realized that her three behaviors have completely...
They're watching, waiting, and wondering what comes next. So what do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your take on all of this. And if you made it this far, go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what we're covering next. Trust me, there's always more tea to spill. I'll catch you in the next one.